and says, now you do know that Elvis is recording your song, and you do know that Elvis don't record anything that he don't publish, or at least get half the publishing.
Dolly Parton is one of the few celebrities who rarely makes headlines for drama. She's built a career on kindness, humility, and staying out of the mess. But lately, the calm, sweet Dolly we all thought we knew might not be so calm after all. We all know Dolly's not one to mince words, and recently, she opened up about the one person she truly couldn't stand. So who was bold enough to get on Parton's bad side, and what exactly did this mystery lady do? Join us as we dive into all the details. Tennessee roots and rhinestone dreams. Dolly Parton didn't come from wealth, privilege, or fame. She was born Dolly Rebecca Parton on January 19, 1946, in a tiny one-room cabin on the banks of the Little Pigeon River in Pittman Center, Tennessee. She was the fourth of 12 kids, part of a big, scrappy family where survival meant hustle and heart. Her dad, Robert Lee Parton Sr., everyone just called him Lee, was a tough mountain man who worked as a sharecropper, raised tobacco, and picked up construction gigs just to keep food on the table. He couldn't read or write, but Dolly never saw that as a weakness. She often said he was one of the smartest business minds she ever knew. Her mother, A.V. Lee Caroline, was just as strong, raising 12 children by the age of 35. That included a set of twins. She did it all while battling poor health, keeping the household afloat with stories, music, and a kind of faith that never cracked under pressure. A.V. Lee had roots in Welsh ancestry and passed down ancient ballads from the British Isles, songs that had lived for generations in the Appalachian Mountains. Dolly always said her mother gave her the music and her father gave her the business sense. Her maternal grandfather, Jake Owens, was a Pentecostal preacher, and religion wasn't just a weekend thing. Church was a lifestyle. Dolly grew up singing in the Church of God congregation he led, and it's where she first performed in public at the age of 6. By 7, she was strumming a homemade guitar. At 8, her uncle gave her a real one, and from there, things took off. The family eventually moved up to Locust Ridge, and for Dolly, that was home. It's where most of her childhood memories live, and years later, she even bought back that land. Her brother Bobby helped restore the original farm and build new structures on it. She turned it into something meaningful, a tribute to where she came from. That place inspired one of her most famous songs, like My Tennessee Mountain Home. But make no mistake, the Partons were dirt poor. When Dolly was born, her dad paid the doctor with a sack of cornmeal. That story stayed with her, and later she turned it into a song about the man who delivered her, Dr. Robert F. Thomas. Her early hits like Coat of Many Colors and In the Good Old Days When Times Were Bad painted the full picture. No filters, just the raw truth of growing up in poverty, wrapped in love. Despite how little they had, the Parton family never went hungry. Dolly's 2024 cookbook, Good Lookin' Cookin', which she co-wrote with her sister Rachel, is filled with stories and recipes from those early days, proof that even in hard times, there was always something on the table. Dolly graduated from Sevier County High School in 1964, and she didn't waste a minute. The very next day, she packed her things and headed straight for Nashville. She'd already spent years singing on local radio and TV shows around East Tennessee, including the CA's Walker Show on YVK Radio and WBR-TV. By the time she was 10, she was a regular on screen. At 13, she had her first record, Puppy Love, with a tiny label in Louisiana, Gold Band Records. That same year, she made her debut at the Grand Ole Opry and crossed paths with Johnny Cash, who told her to always trust her gut when it came to her career. And she did. After moving to Nashville, Dolly's songwriting career took off. She signed with Combine Publishing and, alongside her uncle Bill Owens, wrote songs that landed on the charts. They scored 2 top 10 hits for Bill Phillips, Put It Off Until Tomorrow, and The Company You Keep, and got Skeeter Davis to number 11 with Fuel to the Flame. Other artists were lining up to record her work too. Kitty Wells, Hank Williams Jr., and the list kept growing. In 1965, at just 19, she signed with Monument Records. They tried to pitch her as a pop singer despite her wanting to go country. Her high soprano voice made execs nervous about fitting her into the country scene. But when Bill Phillips' version of Put It Off Until Tomorrow hit number 6 with Dolly's uncredited harmony vocals, Monument finally caved. They let her release a country track, That first one, Dumb Blonde, hit number 24 in 1967. Then came Something Fishy, which climbed to number 17. Both tracks landed on her debut album, Hello, I'm Dolly. But the real change came when Porter Wagoner stepped in. In 1967, he invited her to join the Porter Wagoner Show in his touring group. At first, fans weren't exactly thrilled. They still wanted Norma Jean, the woman Dolly replaced, and they made it known by shouting Norma's name from the crowd. But Dolly didn't let it rattle her. With Porter backing her, she eventually won them over. Wagoner had clout and RCA. Victor listened when he said Dolly was the real deal. Her first RCA single was a duet with him, a cover of Tom Paxton's The Last Thing on My Mind. It hit the top 10 in January 1968, and that launched a run of duet hits that dominated the country charts. But her solo tracks were struggling to keep up. Even songs that would later become classics like In the Good Old Days, When Times Were Bad, barely made a dent at first. By 1970, Porter was co-producing her music and owned nearly half of O-Par, the publishing company Dolly had started with her uncle. They were all in. But when Dolly's solo career kept stalling, he pushed her to record Mule Skinner Blues, an old Jimmy Rogers tune. It worked. The song shot to number 3. Just a few months later, in 1971, she had her first solo number 1, Joshua. That kicked off a hot streak. She followed it with hits like Coat of Many Colors, Touch Your Woman, Travelin' Man, and My Tennessee Mountain Home. The duet machine with Wagoner was still rolling too, with songs like The Right Combination, Burning the Midnight Oil, and Lost Forever in Your Kiss all landing in the top 20. But then came Jolene. Released in late 1973, it hit number 1 in early 1974 and eventually climbed into the UK charts too. It became her signature. Around that time, Dolly made a decision, one that would change everything. She wanted out. She had always dreamed of a solo career, and it was time to leave Porter's organization. Their last duet concert was in April 1974, and she stepped away from his TV show that summer. He still helped produce her albums through 1975, and they even released one final duet album together, Say Forever You'll Be Mine. Then came the song, I Will Always Love You. Written about her decision to walk away from Wagoner, it went straight to number 1. Elvis Presley wanted to record it too. Dolly was interested until his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, mentioned something about handing over half the publishing rights. Dolly didn't even flinch. She walked away from the deal. Years later, that same song would go on to earn her tens of millions in royalties. That one decision? Career-defining. By the end of 1974, Dolly had 3 number 1 solo hits under her belt: Jolene, I Will Always Love You, and Love Is Like a Butterfly. Add in one last duet with Porter, Please Don't Stop Loving Me, and she was officially unstoppable. Years later, in a 2019 interview for Brian Johnson, A Life on the Road, Dolly laughed as she told the story of finding an old cassette tape and realizing she'd written both Jolene and I Will Always Love You in the same night. She called it one of the best nights of her life. She kept the momentum going with The Bargain Store in 1975, which also hit number 1. By that point, there was no denying it. Dolly had stepped into her own spotlight and she wasn't going anywhere. And although Dolly was able to walk away from Porter Wagoner, this wasn't the full story. Her walking out led to a full-blown feud and a lawsuit. The bitter feud between Porter Wagoner and Dolly Parton. Dolly Parton and Porter Wagoner weren't just a great country duo. They were also a powder keg. Their partnership made music history, but the fallout was just as headline-worthy. What started as a fairy tale collaboration in 1967 turned into a decade-long roller coaster that ended in a lawsuit, a few choice words, and eventually a heartfelt reunion. But how did everything start? And when did it start to go downhill? Keep watching to find out. Dolly was just 21 when Porter came into the picture. She was young, ambitious, and already turning heads with her debut album, Hello, I'm Dolly. One of the tracks, Dumb Blonde, caught Porter's attention. At the time, he had the biggest syndicated country show in the country and had just lost his female co-star. He offered Dolly the slot and she said yes. That one decision changed her life forever. Even though Dolly initially thought she'd only be on the Porter Wagoner show for a short while, she ended up staying nearly 10 years. She admitted later on that her real passion was solo work, but Porter's platform gave her the kind of exposure most artists could only dream about. According to Porter's daughter Deborah, Dolly didn't just sing. she reignited her father's creative spark. Their chemistry was electric, and it paid off. Hit after hit rolled out, and the duo took home Vocal Duo of the Year 3 times at the CMA Awards. But the success came with tension. By 1974, the cracks were starting to show. Dolly and Porter were fighting more than collaborating. Decisions about their performances were being made without her input, and she wasn't quiet about it. Their relationship was intense, constantly clashing because both of them were strong-willed, confident, and fiercely protective of their vision. Dolly later revealed that she always tried to go along with him, but only to a point. When something didn't sit right, she pushed back. Eventually, she knew it was time to move on. She had dreams that went beyond being someone's sidekick, so she did what Dolly does best. She turned her emotions into a song. She wrote a goodbye letter in the form of music. The next day, she walked into Porter's office, asked him to sit down, and played him the track. He broke down in tears and told her it was the most beautiful song he'd ever heard. He agreed to let her go, but only if he got to produce the record. The song was "I Will Always Love You," and it would go on to become one of the most iconic ballads in music history. Dolly's solo career exploded after that. She became a household name, topping charts and breaking records. But just when it seemed like the dust had settled, Porter came back swinging. In 1979, he filed a $3 million lawsuit against her, claiming she had breached their contract. He alleged that her departure caused him to cancel tours, and that even after she left, he was still technically her manager and deserved a cut of her earnings. The case was eventually settled, and they found their way back to peace. In a 1983 interview, Porter tried to set the record straight. He insisted that the feud never really existed the way it was portrayed. In his words, it was the lawyers and legal mess that made them look like enemies. He made it clear that he had nothing but love for Dolly. Over time, that love became impossible to deny. In 2007, 5 months before Porter passed away, Dolly honored him at the Grand Ole Opry with an emotional performance of "I Will Always Love You." According to Deborah, there was no question about how much they cared for one another. She shared that Dolly was at Porter's bedside just 2 hours before he passed, and that final visit meant the world to their family. The drama between Dolly Parton and Porter Wagoner could have left them bitter and distant, but it didn't. Despite the fighting, the lawsuit, and the public fallout, they found their way back to each other. At the end of the day, it wasn't about the feud. It was about the bond, the kind that never really goes away. "I Will Always Love You" wasn't the only successful song that Parton had under her belt. Another song that is still a hit to this very day is Jolene. The real story behind Jolene. In the history of country music, few songs have stirred up as much emotion and fascination as Dolly Parton's haunting ballad Jolene. Released in October 1973, the song quickly captured the imagination of fans everywhere. With its pleading lyrics and that unforgettable melody, Dolly told the story of a woman practically begging another, Jolene, the stunning redhead, not to steal her man. It wasn't just another heartbreak anthem. It was raw, emotional, and deeply human. Jolene wasn't just a hit, it was iconic. And to make it even more jaw-dropping, Dolly revealed that she wrote Jolene around the same time she penned "I Will Always Love You." According to her, both songs came to life within days of each other. During an interview with Smooth Country, she explained that she found both songs on the same cassette tape. She believed they must have been written within the same week, maybe a day or two apart. She figured they had to be good ones since they both landed on the Jolene album. The heart of Jolene lies in its simplicity. It's a woman, vulnerable and scared, facing another woman's beauty head-on. The lyrics paint Jolene as almost otherworldly, with flaming red hair, ivory skin, and piercing green eyes. Dolly's narrator doesn't threaten or accuse. She pleads. She asks Jolene not to take what she could easily have. It's that raw honesty and emotion that made the song stand out. It wasn't about catfights or confrontation. It was about insecurity, love, and the quiet desperation to hold on to something slipping away. But here's the twist. Jolene came from 2 real-life inspirations. The name? That came from a fan. A little girl who approached Dolly after a concert asking for an autograph. She was striking. Red hair, flawless skin, and eyes that just glowed. Dolly told NPR in 2008 that she looked down at the girl and told her she was the prettiest little thing she had ever seen. When the girl said her name was Jolene, Dolly immediately knew it sounded like a song, and she made a mental note to write one. The story itself came from another redhead, one who worked at a bank and clearly had a crush on Dolly's husband, Carl Dean. Dolly noticed it right away, and while she wasn't exactly worried, it became a joke between her and Carl. But that little flash of jealousy, mixed with the name she couldn't forget, became the perfect spark for one of country music's most iconic songs. Years later, during her Glastonbury performance in 2014, Dolly decided to spill the full story. She told the crowd that Jolene was loosely based on truth. She recalled a time when her husband was spending a little too much time chatting up a certain redhead. She made it clear she shut that situation down fast. But Dolly also pointed out that something good came out of it. If it hadn't been for that redhead, she wouldn't have written Jolene, and she wouldn't have made all that money. Chart-wise, Jolene was a smash. It became Dolly's second solo #1 country single by February 1974, just a few months after its release. It also made a respectable dent in the pop world and landed on the adult contemporary charts. In the UK, it became Dolly's first top 10 hit, peaking at #7 in 1976. Fast forward to 2014, and that same Glastonbury performance sent the song right back into the charts all over again. Some classics really never die. And of course, Jolene has been covered more times than anyone can count. But a few versions stand out. In 2016, Dolly teamed up with Pentatonics for a fresh take on the song. That version made her the first artist to have top 20 hits across 6 different decades, the 60s through the 2010s. At the 2019 Grammy Awards, when Dolly was honored as MusiCare's Person of the Year, she performed Jolene alongside her goddaughter Miley Cyrus. Then Beyoncé came along in 2024 and flipped the script completely. On her album Cowboy Carter, she covered Jolene with an entirely new vibe. Other artists have paid tribute too. The White Stripes gave it a raw, rock edge. Olivia Newton-John softened it. Lil Nas X brought a modern twist. Even Scottish duo Strawberry Switchblade gave it a spin. And through every version, one thing has remained. Jolene is a song that taps into something deep. Fear, love, power, and heartbreak. And maybe that's why the song hit so hard, because it came from a real place. Dolly didn't just write about love, she lived it. Behind the big personality was a woman fiercely protective of the one relationship that truly grounded her. Inside Dolly Parton's love life. Dolly Parton has always been larger than life. Her career, her wardrobe, her laugh, her generosity, everything about her has been bold and unapologetically out there. But the one part of her life that stayed firmly in the background was her husband, Carl Dean. And that's exactly how they liked it. While Dolly was out conquering the world, Carl was back home in Tennessee, supporting her every move from behind the curtain. He never gave interviews, never walked red carpets, and didn't care for fame. But for nearly 60 years, he was the one person Dolly always came home to. They were married for 58 years, up until Carl's death on March 3rd at the age of 82. In a statement on Instagram, Dolly said they had spent many wonderful years together and that no words could do justice to the love they shared for over 6 decades. Their home was a sprawling property in Brentwood, where Carl spent most of his time working in the barn or tinkering with equipment, while Dolly hit the road. They made it work by embracing their differences. He was a homebody. She was a star. The space between them, according to Dolly, kept things exciting. She never missed Christmas, though. That was sacred. They didn't try to blend their worlds. Carl loved music, but had zero interest in the business. Dolly once said that was one of the best things about their marriage. They had different things to talk about. His world, her world, and in between, a twisted sense of humor that kept them laughing. For those who wondered why Carl never showed up at events, the answer was simple: he didn't want to, and Dolly never forced him. She said he supported her fully, as long as she didn't try to drag him into the spotlight. And he always had her back, just off camera. They met the day Dolly arrived in Nashville. She was 18, fresh off the bus from Sevierville, Tennessee, heading to the laundromat. Carl drove past in a white Chevrolet and called out that she was going to get sunburned. She didn't hop in the car, of course. She had better sense than that, but she did invite him to her aunt and uncle's house where she was staying. He came by the next day, and the next. By the end of the week, he was taking her to meet his parents. She later said he told her right away that he knew she was the one. They were just kids. Dolly was barely legal and Carl was 22, but they didn't waste time. When she started making a name for herself as a songwriter, her boss told her not to get married. He warned it could wreck her chances of making it big. So she and Carl did the opposite. They eloped to Ringgold, Georgia on May 30th, 1966. The only guest was her mother, who also took the wedding photo. They kept the whole thing quiet. Dolly's label didn't even know she was married until a year later. One day, the same exec who had warned her against it said he was glad she hadn't gone and gotten hitched. She didn't correct him. Though she legally became Dolly Parton Dean, she kept her maiden name for her career. She joked that if she'd gone with Dolly Dean, her initials would have been Double D. She brought Carl to exactly one industry event, the BMI Awards in 1966. Afterward, before they even made it to the car, he started pulling off his tux. He told her he was proud of her, but never to ask him to go to one of those things again. And he never did. She went on to win dozens more awards, Grammys, CMAs, ACMs, but he stayed home, cheering her on from the couch. Their life wasn't about money or glitz, but enjoying the little things. One of their earliest dates was a McDonald's drive-thru in that white Chevy. Even with millions in the bank, their tastes stayed simple. They went on road trips, stopped at small-town diners, and shopped at Walmart in the middle of the night to avoid crowds. She said they'd laugh, shop in peace, and make a night out of it. The fact that Carl was rarely seen led some fans to joke that he didn't exist. Dolly understood the speculation. There weren't many photos, and he never gave interviews, but he was always there. She once put him on the cover of her My Blue Ridge Mountain Boy album in 1969, just a shadowy figure in a flannel. But it was him. She protected his privacy fiercely. She said if he ever got dragged into her world, he'd never get a minute's peace. And she wasn't wrong. When they renewed their vows on their 50th anniversary, it was low-key. Dolly wore the wedding dress of her dreams. Carl cleaned up like a movie star. There was no press, no red carpet, just a small ceremony at their chapel and a new song called Forever Love, which she wrote just for him. They never had kids. Early on, they thought it might happen. They even picked out names. Dolly later said she used to think she should regret it, but over time she saw it differently. Maybe she wasn't meant to have her own children so she could love everyone else's. She and Carl joked in later years that they were glad they didn't have kids. It meant they had more time for each other and fewer things to worry about. Still, she wasn't without family. As one of 12 siblings, Dolly always had someone to take care of. Several of her younger brothers and sisters lived with her and Carl for years. They were also close with their nieces and nephews. Dolly once said that when the daffodils bloomed in spring, Carl always picked her a bouquet, sometimes with a handwritten poem. To her, that was better than any fancy dinner. It was the kind of love story most people could only dream of. But not everyone who crossed Dolly's path left her smiling, because for all the warmth she gave the world, there was one encounter that lit a fire she never forgot. The one person Dolly Parton utterly despised. In 1977, two women at the height of their powers sat across from each other on national television. One was Barbara Walters, the reigning queen of the tough interview. The other, Dolly Parton, in sky-high heels, a mountain of hair, and a smile that could light up a room or disarm a threat. And by the end of the night, only one of them walked away looking even stronger than before. Spoiler, it wasn't Barbara. This was Walters' primetime interview special, a show known for pushing celebrities into uncomfortable corners just to see how they'd squirm. She had already grilled Hollywood icons and political giants. But when it came time to sit down with Dolly, Barbara wasn't prepared. Because unlike others before her, Dolly didn't squirm, she didn't flinch, and she certainly didn't play nice to please the room. Barbara came in sharp, wasting no time before going for the one thing everyone always fixated on: Dolly's appearance, the wigs, the lashes, the low-cut tops, the rhinestones. She looked her straight in the eye and told her she didn't have to look that way, that she was beautiful and didn't need all the flash. It was the kind of comment that dripped with condescension, meant to poke, to belittle. But Dolly didn't blink. She explained that every inch of her look was intentional, that she knew it looked over the top, and that was exactly why she did it. Because once people got past the surface, they'd see there was a real person underneath. She said she was very real where it counted, and that was inside. Most people might have taken that as a cue to back off, but not Barbara. She kept digging, pressing Dolly with a question that was clearly meant to sting. She asked if Dolly ever felt like a joke. Still, Dolly didn't flinch. She answered with the same calm steel in her voice. She said she knew people laughed at her, that they thought the joke was on her. But she'd always known better. The real joke, she said, had been on them. She made it clear that she was in control of her image and could change it any time she wanted. And with that, she shut the whole thing down. But the wildest part was that Dolly knew it would go this way. In her memoir, Dolly, My Life and Other Unfinished Business, she wrote that people warned her. They told her Barbara would try to take her apart on camera, that she'd go for the jugular. But Dolly went in anyway. Not because she trusted Barbara, but because she didn't fear her. She wrote that Barbara was insightful, sure, but the implication was clear. Dolly knew she'd be patronized, judged, picked apart. But she also knew that once Barbara saw that Dolly wasn't playing a character, that she really was this woman through and through, there'd be nothing left to attack. And that's the thing about Dolly. She didn't win by defending herself. She won by refusing to play along. She showed up loud, proud, and exactly as she wanted to be, and still left with the upper hand. To this day, the clip still circulates, not because it's just some vintage moment in pop culture, but because it's a masterclass, a quiet, devastating takedown, a reminder that not all battles are fought with raised voices. Sometimes the sharpest blow is delivered with a smile. She once said it cost a lot of money to look this cheap, but everyone knew better. Dolly was no fool. She was a razor wrapped in rhinestones. And in that interview, she let Barbara Walters walk herself right into a wall of steel disguised as Southern charm. Barbara built her career making people uncomfortable. But that night she met someone who saw straight through it and didn't have time for the game. Dolly didn't just survive the interview. She walked away with her image, her dignity, and her power fully intact. And Barbara? She might have tried to dismiss her as a gimmick, but Dolly left the room knowing exactly who had come out on top. And deep down, she never forgot the way Barbara tried to come for her, nor did she forgive it. Do you think Dolly handled the interview with Barbara well, or do you think otherwise? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.